And we are live. Okay, glad you tuned in. Today's topic is the social justice warrior infestation of academia. With me is Dean Esme, if I pronounced it correctly. He's the managing editor of A Voice for Men. Dean, tell us something about yourself.
Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Dean Esme, so close enough. Say it like the French woman's name, Esme, but I'll take anything else. Yes, I'm managing editor and operations manager for A Voice for Men, which may be why Dr. Lehman wanted to talk to me. I'm also an avid participant, not a leader by any means, but a participant in Gamergate, so maybe we'll wind up talking about that too. And I also host 2 radio shows on A Voice for Men Radio. I'm co-host of Tales from the Infrared, which is every other Saturday on live365.com, where we talk about geek culture from what we call the red pill perspective, which is geek culture from the red pill perspective. I've been running the podcast for 2 years. Started it with my friend Typhon Blue, Allison Tiemann, but now I do it with Christian Chasson, Rachel Edwards, and a few others. And then every other week I do a radio show on domestic violence and related matters with Aaron Pitsey, who founded the Battered Women's Shelter movement back in the 1970s. So that's... And I'm a husband, and I'm a dad, and I'm a gamer for 40 years, I think, maybe. So that's me.
So you are pretty much the worst shitlord and the worst racist there is, right?
Well, I am fat, middle-aged, white, straight, and have a neckbeard, and I play video games. So I do not think there can be a worse human being than me.
You triggered me so hard.
Maybe Pol Pot. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Maybe, just maybe. Okay, so what I wanted to ask, you just said you run a few radio shows, right?
Yes, sir.
And I was wondering, often you can tell the educational background of a person by listening to the term the person uses. And maybe you know what I'm getting at, but have you ever had callers to your radio show that clearly had a college background or higher academic background and that were really not able to form critical thinking and were just spouting social justice warrior nonsense?
None on our radio shows, no, and that's because no, once or twice. Usually we wind up hanging up on them because they're just being stupid. But no, usually we don't take a whole lot of phone calls. Usually we have on a guest and just talk. Or on the Tales from the Infrared show, we're busy, there's like 5 people on that show, and we sit around and argue about Doctor Who and The Walking Dead and the latest upcoming video games, our, nerd stuff, right? On the other hand, as a men's rights activist, one of those horrible, nasty, evil MRAs that you hear are supposedly so bad, I have run into many vapid people at protests especially, and seen how, I'll give you a clue on how bad I see. I was just down, for example, at Kennesaw State University in the state of Georgia in the U.S., and we were talking about certain specific men's issues, such as men's decline in academia, which is very big in the U.S. and Canada. I don't know about in Europe. And suicide among young men, which is very high compared to young women, and issues like that. And there were feminist protests, and they were unbelievably vapid. Logic, went past them. I mean, and I'm not talking about having a disagreement, but just literally looking at somebody and say, you understand this statistic, like there's a statistic rolling around now that is wildly popular, that supposedly 1 in 5 women are going to be raped by a man while they're in college in the United States.
I think I actually debunked that statistic in one of my videos. Is that the one with the sample of 16,000 something students via telephone?
There are several studies, and that's probably one of them, because there are several such studies claiming that 1 in 5 women are going to be raped in college. And there's about 18 things at once wrong with that statistic. Seriously, it's a mess. It's a total mess. And so where would I begin with what's wrong? There are sampling issues with some of them, but the bottom line is they all actually, and by the way, I've seen the statistic float, because once in a while they'll claim 1 in 4 college women are going to be raped, and I've even seen in print 1 in 3 college women are going to be raped, which makes me think, okay, so it's a negotiation, right? That's a joke. You're supposed to laugh. It must be. Do I have 1 in 2? Anybody want to? How about 1? How about 2 out of 1? They're all dumb statistics, right? They all have their origin in a professor at the University of Arizona, believe it or not, named Mary Koss, who in the 1980s did the first of a chain of studies finding this ridiculous result. And the way she fundamentally arrives at it, and the way they all fundamentally arrive at it, is this. First off, they take lifetime prevalence, and any woman in college who says she's ever been raped is counted as a woman in college who's been raped, right? But that means she could have been raped any time before she went to college, and it doesn't matter where she is in college now or how old she is now. So already when you're hearing this 1 in 5 statistic, you're hearing, oh, well, in this 4-year span, she's got a 1 in 5 chance. No. It was lifetime prevalence. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, what they're calling rape is any unwanted sexual contact at all.
Yeah, actually, I have the quote somewhere flying around. They actually specified in the very first sentence, mostly, that it is unwanted penetration, penetration, unwanted finished penetration, and of course any form of sexual contact, which is just, no, that is not the definition of rape.
That's right, any unwanted sexual contact, which means, amongst other things, ladies, if you are at a party and you are both drinking beers and you're both kissing, and he reaches under your blouse and grabs your breast, and you push his hand away and say, no, I don't want to do that right now, you are now a rape victim.
Yep.
And this is ludicrous. Also,
about it on your Tumblr.
Also, while we're here, one of the questions is, did a man give you alcohol prior to you having sex with him? And if you say yes, you are a rape victim. So if a man buys you a drink and then you agree to go have sex with him, you are a rape victim. These are ludicrous ways of dealing with sex. And as somebody who was sexually abused as a child, I find it particularly pernicious, because what this is really doing, it is creating a climate of fear in women, of men. It is creating a climate of guilt in men that they don't deserve, because most real rapists are a very slim percentage of the population. Most men will never rape and would find the idea of raping to be ghastly. I can't imagine doing that to somebody myself. I mean, okay, I can imagine it, but I would just feel so horrible, you know. It's like imagining stabbing somebody or shooting them in the face. I can imagine it, but it would be horrible, right? And it's diminishing the experiences of people who have been truly traumatized, beaten, injured, severely humiliated, who are a much smaller percentage of the population, but they need genuine compassion and care. And with these obscene ideas that any sexual contact where there's alcohol, any sexual content that was like, oh, that was a little more than I wanted, you're going to call that rape. This is actually harmful to rape victims. But try to explain any of this to some of these social justice warrior types, and they either become enraged or they call you names. I was at a protest in Toronto where a friend of mine, well, we were arguing, and this is with college students, right? College students who were arguing, and they were saying women are oppressed, and they're saying women are oppressed because men have a majority, are in a majority of political power positions. Like, you know, the Prime Minister of Canada is a man, and something like 3/4 of the Canadian Parliament is men. So this means Canadian women are oppressed, right? And my friend, he points out, well, women are 55%. They're a little about like 51, 52% of the Canadian population, and they're 55% of Canadian voters, which means women are a majority of voters and can put into power anyone they want. Women are the majority of voters.
But if you look at the
And,
people running for parliament,
well, let me finish the thing. Instead of even asking that intelligent question, which is a reasonable question, but instead of even asking that, this one socialist, one guy, a fellow, I don't want to stereotype, but he's Asian, which I guess not all Asians are good at math, obviously, right? That's a joke. He's Asian, and he screams at the top of his lungs, 55% is not the majority! He literally said that.
I don't know. I just want off this wild ride. Come on.
What? We're not even on the same planet to have a discussion. Because he stood by this. Well, because then we said, well, what's a majority? And he said 70%, 90%. Okay.
Just no. I mean, no. Just no. Hand over your bachelor's degree right now and go back to university. And no, just no.
Yes, it's just this bad. It's just this bad. Now, yes, we could get into questions of why do more men run as candidates in the first place, and I suppose you could think, well, maybe that's because women are discouraged or whatever, but there's other reasonable reasons to analyze this question, right? More men choose to run, more women choose not to, and so on. This is how a rational person would start the conversation. But no, once you're still dealing with 55% is not a majority, that's a level of denial. It's ludicrous, right? It's just ludicrous. And the problem is that this makes its way all the way up to the professoriate. Don't mean to be using big words, but it makes all of this way up to associate professors and professors. Through my show with Aaron Pitsey, at least the old show, we recently changed formats, but in the old show, we interviewed a number of top-level academics, world-class academics, talking about subjects like domestic violence and sexual assault and issues like this. And many of these are professors who are now in their 60s, 70s, and in the case of one, he's now almost 90s. I think he's like 88, 89. Professor Murray Strauss. So they've been around a while. And what they will all tell you is that certain areas of research, well, first of all, Murray Strauss actually got bomb and death threats for some of his work.
Oh, come on.
This is true. Professor Murray Strauss of the University of New Hampshire. Now, actually, he's a brilliant man. As far as I'm concerned, he has no business being at the University of New Hampshire, which is a fine university, but he is so well respected and so accomplished, he ought to be at some place like Harvard or Oxford or Berkeley, some place like that. But he was the very first researcher, and there have been many to follow him. He was the very first researcher all the way back in the early 1970s to demonstrate through extensive study that when it comes to domestic violence, women hit men about as often as men hit women.
That's sexist. Nope, I'm gonna kick you from the chat. That's sexist.
Oh, you should see the rage you get out. Now, he was the first to show this. There have been literally hundreds of studies since then that show the same thing, that in domestic violence, men and women hit each other at about the same rate. There are hundreds of peer-reviewed studies which show this. In fact, what they really show, the most reasonable view of domestic violence, is that in about half of domestic violence cases, both people are equally violent. And that you really can't, it's like a stupid even to say who started it, because they're both violent people. And violent people attract each other, and they get into these terrible relationships with each other, and they're screaming, and they're biting, and they're yelling, and they're throwing, and they're hitting, whatever. In about 25% of the cases, it is mostly the man beating on the woman, and in about another 25% of the cases, it's mostly the woman beating on the man. And actually, in what they call, in most relationships where there is hitting, about 70% of the time, the woman is the first one to hit. Now, when it's reciprocal and all that, it's funny, but at about 70% of the time, if there's hitting, the woman hits first. Now, then, of course, what happens is if the man hits back, she's more likely to be injured because he's bigger and he's stronger mostly. But even just saying that frequently in these violent relationships, women frequently are the ones who start it. Yes, people become enraged and angry. But unfortunately, the empirical research shows this to be true, and it's backed up by at this point hundreds of studies. I'll give you the references if you want.
Yeah,
or
sure.
I'll give you the content. Well, the best overall reference is something called the Fiebert Bibliography by Professor Martin Fiebert, who's at the University of California, somewhere in the University of California system. He's been regularly updating that every few years. He's a professor of psychology. So he publishes a meta-review every few years looking at all the literature. Martin S. Fiebert, F-I-E-B-E-R-T. If you look for Martin S. Fiebert on Google, you'll find the latest version he's got.
Mm-hmm.
There's a site we run now called whiteribbon.org, which has a number of peer-reviewed studies you can look at, as well as all the radio shows I've done. I've interviewed Professor Donald Dutton, Professor Martin Fiebert, Professor Richard Felsen, Dr. Warren Farrell, quite a few others to talk about these things. Professor Martin,
Can I just interrupt for a moment? Just for a moment.
Yeah.
There's something very interesting that I found talking to a lot of people on every scale of the spectrum. If you look more towards the social justice warriors, you are getting less and less actually academic work, and the more you are looking towards egalitarian work or just general political work that does not subscribe to any pluralistic issue, the more you get academically reviewed stuff. So now you're saying you have a radio show, you have a website, and you actually interviewed a number of professors. Now, if you look at, for instance, Feminist Frequency, her sources are just atrocious. Her sources are just an insult to everyone and everything. Just no.
Yes. Now, let's be clear. I'm not a college professor. I consider myself an activist and a journalist. I interview professors, but I spent many years doing the things that I do, and I make a point of going to academic sources first, either reading whenever I can what's in the peer-reviewed academic literature or speaking directly to college professors. For some reason, people seem to be, it astounds me how many reporters or so-called journalists today will not even pick up a phone and say, how can I talk to Professor so-and-so? When usually you can go right to their website of their university and find their office telephone number, if not their email address. I know I'm changing the subject a little, but I chuckle sometimes because people will say, how did you get this interview with this prestigious professor? And I will say, I used Google and found their phone number on their university website and called them. It was an amazing trick. And they're like, can't believe it's that easy, because it's just that easy, because most professors will talk to you. So anyway, yes, Anita Sarkeesian, total shit on anything she presents in terms of evidence or research.
Have you had ever a look
a
on
total embarrassment, huh?
Did you ever take a look at her master thesis?
I have only seen pieces of it. You know, that investigative journalism and Thunderfoot and a few others have put out. It's clear that, I mean, she's got a couple of diagrams that make no sense whatsoever and actually are rather misogynistic if you look at them. I'll make a man out of you. What I see, I have not read her entire master's thesis. What I have seen of it is incoherent.
Exactly. It's
even
just
less coherent than her videos, which are not very coherent to begin with.
Truth.
Although they do make a lot of assertions, but all I can say of her videos is that it is proof by repeated assertion. You assume X to be true, and then you assert over and over again that X is true, and then you manufacture evidence to prove that X is true once you've established that it's already true. If you see what I mean.
I know exactly.
Without ever questioning, is your premise correct in the first place? And this is the basis of empiricism that apparently is no longer being taught to many university students or even high school students.
That's a very good thing. If I can just jump in, just to enlighten our audience about this a little bit. There are actually three dominant courses of political theory. Like, there are three dominant schools of political thought. There you have a slightly outdated political school of thought that mainly looked at what is just, what is righteous. Then you have a slightly newer political school of thought, which some refer to as a cultural Marxist school of thought. It is basically the dialectic school of thought. And then you have the empirical analytical school of thought, the currently dominant school of thought that uses statistics, that uses proof, that uses diagrams and hard numbers and hard facts to actually come to conclusions. And the big issue with people like Anita Sarkeesian is, instead of using this for a very good reason, dominant science, they jump to whichever pluralistic school of thought they can get their hands on. Like, she jumps to a completely convoluted mess of dialectics and feminism. And if you apply a different school of thought to her school of thought, you suddenly notice she doesn't make any sense. Only within the boundaries of the school she has chosen, and very cleverly chosen, she makes sense. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say to that.
Well, and it's not just Sarkeesian, because I think it's the milieu she comes from. I mean, she obviously was granted a master's thesis from people who thought there was value, or they wouldn't have given her the master's degree. And so that has to say something about her teachers.
Yes.
And I think that you mentioned cultural Marxism. I think that while the influence of cultural Marxism can be overstated, it's not like there's a cultural Marxist hiding under every bush at your university ready to pounce on everything. But cultural Marxism is real. You can go and use Google to find, specific people like, what was it, Gramsci and a few of those who did and do have an influence on the university system. And feminism is one of the primary goals of that. Now, I think it's evolved since then, and I think a lot of people who think like that are not necessarily cultural Marxists, but they've just grown up around with this way of reasoning in their heads. And it is a way of reasoning. but the thing I can mostly identify about this way of reasoning is we collectively decide, mostly through agreeing with each other, what is true. So fact becomes what we all agree it to be, and then anybody who disagrees with us, there is something wrong with them, and they either need to be fixed or they are evil and must be destroyed. And I'm seeing this mentality creeping up, not just in our universities, but I'm seeing it creeping into the, like, what we call high school in the United States, secondary level of education. Because I'm seeing, people 50. When I was younger, I hate to sound like an old man, but I went to a Catholic high school in Chicago in the early 1980s. And you say whatever you want about the Catholic Church and religion and all that. When I went to science class or even theology class, logic and reason and proof mattered first on most things. And if you didn't have proof, and the math works or it doesn't, this chemical reaction happens or it doesn't. Experiments have to be duplicated, or they are independently duplicatable and replicable, or they don't mean anything. These were things I knew before I got out of high school. And yet I'm seeing an increasing number of people not only who reject that whole idea, but don't even understand that idea. They literally don't understand what empiricism is. And some of them now are college professors. And I don't know, I've seen this seems to have mostly infected the humanities, but it's all over the social sciences, and I think it's even creeping into some of the hard sciences.
It is. It is.
Feminism is probably the biggest one, and I know people are sitting here listening saying, feminism is about equality. Okay, if feminism is about equal rights for women, then I am a feminist, and so is almost everybody I know. I don't work with anybody who doesn't agree women should have equal rights to men. I've met people that don't think that. A very few in my life. I've met people who think women shouldn't have all the same rights as men. But I don't have any as friends. I don't work with anybody like that. So if feminism is the idea that women should have equal rights, then I'm a feminist. When I criticize feminism, I am talking about feminism with power and feminism with political influence. And in the university system especially, feminism is not an idea that women should be equal. Feminism is an ideology. It's an ideology like conservatism or liberalism or socialism or capitalism. Feminism is an ideology. And in the university system, it's a very powerful ideology. Academics can be punished for publishing papers or doing research that might question feminist doctrines.
To really get the full load of how dumb this is, you can publish a paper where you criticize any pluralistic approach to political science. You can go against utilitarianism, against pragmatism, against realpolitik. You can go against anything. But the very moment you go against feminism, that's pretty much it for your college career. So, yeah.
That's correct. That's correct. And feminism holds to certain tenets, but I'll tell you, I mean, you can look from my interview with Professor Richard Felsen, by the way, who's a criminologist at Penn State University, a very distinguished criminologist. And he'll tell you straight out, there is a system of gender apartheid on American universities. I imagine it must be the same elsewhere. He literally calls it gender apartheid. It's not only that certain things won't be published, or that you'll be punished for publishing them, but if you even try to get a grant or try to study certain questions, you may lose your career. Just the fact that women are equally violent to men in domestic violence relations will get you in big trouble, even though it's a fact. It's as close as you can state to a fact in social science. In domestic relationships, women are as violent as men. Also, by the way, most child abuse is committed by women. That's not a misogynist statement. It's just a statistical fact. Most child abuse is committed by women. Some of that is because they have more opportunity, but it remains a fact. But you can't talk about this, and you can't analyze it. You can't even propose programs to address it. If you look very carefully, you'll see there all over, at least in the English-speaking world, there's all kinds of programs about men's violence towards women and ending violence towards women. And yet most people remain blissfully unaware that women in intimate partner relationships are just as violent as men are. Women commit the majority of child abuse, not all of it, but the majority. And in fact, when you're looking at violence overall, you pick any form of violence you want, even sexual violence, and the majority of victims of all forms of violence are men and boys. All forms of violence. Majority are men and boys. It is very dangerous to even talk about this. You can, but you've got to couch it within the feminist ideological framework. And the feminist ideological framework for the last 10 years or so has been patriarchy. Within academic circles, they have begun to deprecate the term patriarchy because it's become too popular, I think. And the new preferred phrasing is what they call intersectionality. And intersectionality is actually the intellectual framework that the social justice warrior phenomenon actually comes out of. In the older feminist model, you had this idea of patriarchy, which is that men dominate women, right? Men rule society, men dominate women, women are subordinate to men. That is a very questionable theory, but that was the theory they worked under. So the dialectical theory is the world is ruled by patriarchy, patriarchy dominates women, and patriarchy also sometimes hurts men too. Now, that's how they think. Now, there's so many problems with that way of thinking, and so many people have, I think, called bullshit on it, that they've decided they need more terminology and they need to be more sophisticated. So now they've added in critical analysis of sexuality and race into it to develop this elaborate theory that there are different types of oppression, which, by the way, I wouldn't disagree with. And so you have to be able to find a way of mixing in racism with sexism, with whether or not somebody's able-bodied, whether or not somebody's gay or straight, whether they, trans or cis. Okay, but really it's all just a slightly more sophisticated version of the old patriarchy model, because they assume men are always superior to women, socially. White is always superior to black. Straight is always superior to gay. And so the intersectionality, basically, if you ask me, it's just overtly racist and overtly hateful towards people based on sex rather than covertly racist. Because the patriarchy theory was a racist theory to begin with. And now they're just overtly racist.
We actually have a question from the chat. I completely overlooked it. So if I can just read it out.
Sorry.
What if people just ignore social justice warriors? Will they go away? Asked by Bubblegum Gun. That's a good question.
It is a very good question, and I don't know what Dr. Lehman's answer is, but mine is, no, don't, no, they won't go away. You don't get it. They're taking over the universities. And their stuff is making its way into the high school, secondary education system, and they're even bringing it into the primary school levels now. So if you do not give them any pushback, all right, people call it Godwinizing, or they call it paranoia, or whatever, But I'll tell you, when the National Socialists were coming up into power in the early days of Hitler, one of the first places they went was to the universities to seduce the intellectuals and take over the intellectuals there. And yes, when communism made its way across Eastern Europe before it got military, they first went after the academics and the popular media. Now, I'm not going to call this against...
I actually have a story about Eastern
Sure.
Europe. My father attended university quite early on during the very first years of the communist takeover of Eastern Europe. And we were talking a little bit about this whole social justice warrior thing. And he told me, oh, I lived through something very similar. In the year 51, I believe he said, you could pretty much talk about anything you wanted on the universities. Yes, you had some sort of rules installed, but no one really enforced those rules. There was a small minority of academics that wanted to push the communist narrative real hard, but no one really cared about them. And I asked him, so what happened then? Well, 68, the tanks came. So basically, he described that he had to abort university because he couldn't bear it. And the thing is, my father was one of the founding members of the country's Communist Party. He was a shining example of the common worker, but he just couldn't go through with this kind of indoctrination and this kind of bullshit. So there you have it, a person that lived through a very similar thing as we're living today. I don't think it will be as harsh and as sudden as the communist takeover of academia, but it will be bad, and we are seeing the very first bad signs of it. Video games, for instance, movies, comics, tabletop games. It's just a matter of time until they take over nerd culture. If they take over nerd culture, they take over universities. If they take over universities, it's over, because universities are pretty much the future of the country.
Well, I'm going to argue with that, Dr. Lay, but I want to argue with you on that. But first, I want to make this point, because broadly, we are in agreement. Not only does what they teach at university eventually make it down to the lower levels of education, so we have children being indoctrinated this way, it does. So think about it. Who becomes teachers? Well, you graduate from college and you go to become a teacher to teach high school or grammar school or whatever. So you're already indoctrinated and you're teaching your young students. But also going the other direction, people who leave university frequently go into government.
Yes.
They go into big business. And they make their way up to the highest echelons of power. And by the way, they don't even have to be elected. They just have to be appointed and get jobs in the bureaucracy. So what's going on in the university goes both directions and eventually trickles out to the whole rest of society. You can sit here now and say, I think I'm alone. What, I work in my job and I like my job. What do I give a shit what some university professors are talking about? It's all bullshit. That stuff's going to make its way into your government, and they're going to make their way into your life. And in big ways and little, they're going to start trying to influence what you're allowed to read, what you're allowed to play, what you're allowed to say. It's going to matter. And I actually think, unlike my diehard capitalist friends, I think big corporations are a worry, and these people are making their way into the halls of power of big corporations. So I don't know if it's going to be government takeover with tanks so much as, well, control the internet and you control it all.
No, I was just making an example how it was quite a few years ago. I was never implying that actually social justice warriors would roll up with tanks. Just no.
No, you weren't. You weren't. Although I wouldn't rule that out either entirely. I mean, if you're in charge of the U.S. military and you've got drones and you've got spy satellites, well, you don't need tanks to do a lot of damage. Let's put it to you that way. Mm-hmm. But more to the point, I think it's not likely to be that draconian. But if they can control all the big internet sites, what's left except a few pockets of resistance that you have to go looking for? The only thing I actually would disagree with you on is I think it's the other way around when it comes to the nerds and the gamers. Because, okay, I'll tell you right now, as a men's rights activist, if you're sitting here listening to this, you have probably never heard anything but awful things about how evil and awful men's rights activists are. And what I would ask you to think is, what do they say about us that's different than what they say about gamers? We're nothing but a bunch of straight, white, hetero, neckbeard losers living in our basements who hate gay people and minorities and women. They say all of this about MRAs. They've been saying all of this about MRAs for years. And there are some guys that match that stereotype, but most do not. Oh, and by the way, there's tons of women who are MRAs, but they don't exist and aren't talked about. Does that sound familiar to you gamers or anybody involved in Gamergate? It should. It's this narrative that they have crafted and that they have used over and over again against other groups. MRAs are one such group. There's others. So when Gamergate came along, for example, I got interested first because I am a gamer. No bullshit. I've been playing video games forever. But second, because this was the same people who've been attacking us. And this is where I'm only going to say I disagree with you in that I don't know if they can take control of gaming. Because I have watched this social justice intersectionality / feminist ideology roll through area of culture after area of culture after culture. There's this thing called the atheist skeptic community here in the U.S. Ideological feminists came in and just completely trashed that. And then the social justice warrior tide hit the gaming community, and it was like the sea crashing against a seawall. Gamers, I mean, you know, you would think intellectual lights like Richard Dawkins and them could fight these people. They can barely handle it. It's the nerds who looked up and stood up and said, no, you're full of shit. Go away. Leave me the fuck alone. Leave us alone. Fuck off. You make no sense. Go away. They're the only group I've seen that so far has managed to stand up to these people and say no and have it stick. I actually think this is the main reason why Gamergate has so infuriated the mainstream press, has so infuriated the academics, has so infuriated all of its enemies, because nerds won't have anything to do with this. That's not what at least that's what I'm seeing so far. Nerds will not put up with it. They will go make their own video games if they have to, and they don't care what Kotaku says. They're going to make the games anyway. They're going to set up their servers anyway. So, you know, you were saying that if they can take control of games, I'm not sure they can take control of games and gaming culture.
Actually, I have to disagree on that one because we have a preceding case. Germany, for instance, has very, very harsh laws against Nazi symbolism of any kind. You don't get any swastikas anywhere, and any positive mentioning of Nazis is just a no-go. If you in any form deny or revise Holocaust numbers, that's a criminal offense. And the thing is, they actually push this very hard into video games. For instance, I don't know if it is a criminal offense or just a delinquency, but owning the real Wolfenstein with the real swastika flags is punishable. So if the state is able and willing to enforce one form of censorship, just imagine what could happen if we don't do anything, and in 15, maybe 20 years, the government has a very strong part of social justice warriors embedded into it. They could, and they have the apparatus to do so. They have the framework to do so. They could push for a censorship of misogynistic games, which, as we've clearly seen with Germany, it is possible to censor games.
You know, you just made me laugh there. I know this is a total change of subject, but I just have to mention actually two funny things. First off, I had some social justice warrior today making fun of me and saying I know nothing about video games. And I said, he said, I know more about video games than you'll ever know. And I said, really? Oh, maybe, but I knew John Romero and John Carmack. How about you? And he said, who's that? And anybody who's listening to, you can be forgiven for not knowing that, but you can't be forgiven for claiming you know all there is to know about video games and not know their names. John Romero, John Carmack are the guys responsible for the original Wolfenstein 3D, which is the one that started the entire first-person shooter thing, right? I remember talking to them, and I'm specifically talking to Carmack about the way that he invented. I mean, you get really deep into it. He's the one who thought of, instead of moving the contents of memory locations around to move things around on the screen, instead he would put something static into memory and then just change what the display circuitry was looking at, and found that was much faster. Anyway, that's too geeky. Bottom line is, Wolfenstein and the original Wolfenstein, and subsequently the entire first-person shooter, was invented by John Carmack, John Romero, and I knew those guys. Now, they're rich and famous. I'm not rich and famous, but I can say I got drunk with them. And now you just told me something interesting. You literally can't have a copy of Wolfenstein in Germany?
I'm not entirely sure whether you can't have one. I know that selling or buying one is prohibited. Which is actually, Germany has some very, very interesting laws. For instance, marijuana. Selling marijuana is illegal. Buying marijuana is illegal. Possessing it is a gray zone but illegal. But consuming marijuana is legal. So, Germany is a really weird case.
And if somebody listening to this would say, well, are you defending Nazism because you don't like these laws banning Nazi symbols? No. You've just made a very good point there. Nazism was evil and hurt an incredible amount of people, including, by the way, a lot of Germans. People don't know this, but a lot of people hated Hitler when he was in power. But if you believe in free speech, you can't ban that. The cure for evil speech is more speech, right? The term totalitarian in English, anyway, was coined by, I forget his name, but he's a guy who studied both communism and Nazism. And totalitarianism was first named after was coined to describe how Germany was ruled under the Third Reich. The state had complete control, total control over every aspect, all media, all print, all broadcast, all movies, all education, total domination of everything. And so in Nazi Germany, just speaking against Hitler or the regime could get you beaten up, it could get you thrown in jail, it could get your family thrown in jail, it could get you killed, it could get your family killed. It was a very evil, despotic regime. So you can understand why, even if you didn't care about the Holocaust, which you should care about the Holocaust, but the point is, even if you didn't care about the Holocaust, there's good reason to look at the Nazis and say they were evil no matter how you look at it. They were evil to the German people. They were evil to the Poles. They were evil to the French. They were evil to everybody. They were especially evil to the Jews. But, okay, now that's over. Why should Nazi symbols be illegal in Germany? Why should it be illegal to buy or sell them? See, this is something I think Americans don't appreciate. Maybe Europeans do. You can say all the bad things you want about my country. I am an American. And many of those criticisms will be fair. Some won't be, some will be. But I think we have one golden thing that I hope never goes away, that is the gold standard that I think the rest of the world should live by, and it's what's called our First Amendment. It is unthinkable in the United States that the government would tell you you can't sell Nazi paraphernalia or use Nazi symbols. It's unthinkable. Our courts would immediately strike it down as in violation of the First Amendment. We had a Nazi party here in the U.S. Actually, it might still exist. I'm not sure. There's no such thing as an illegal political party here. Most people think they're assholes, but no one would dispute they have a right to be Nazis if they want to be, or communists if they want to be, and they can print their literature, and they can say their stupid bullshit, and they're left alone, right? And that's what frightens me about the social justice warrior set is they don't have that mentality of, oh, I think you're just a stupid asshole, so I'm going to ignore you. They actually want to silence, they want to suppress, and they want to destroy anybody who dissents. And that is the essence of totalitarianism to me.
It is, of course it is.
And this is why Gamergate, and sometimes it's frightened me to watch. I mean, it's been exciting to watch and made me feel good because this is the first time I've seen a mass revolt stand up against this ideological, fog that they want to put on everything. But it's frightening because it wasn't just the gaming press, was it? First, it's all the gaming press and that slew of articles stereotyping and demeaning gamers. And when that didn't work, it made its way into the bigger press. Here in the U.S., it was, I think, Washington Post, Slate, I think maybe Time Magazine. I think the BBC did a piece on it. I can't remember. And it was more of the same. Gamergate is nothing but a bunch of angry, straight, white men who hate women. And that's all it is. And it's all these people who hate Zoe Quinn and Brianna Wu and Anita Sarkeesian. And that's all it is. And that truly frightened me. Because, oh my God, it's not just the gaming press. Look how far it is in the regular mainstream press. Although to their credit, there have been others in the mainstream press, like Forbes, has had some reasonable pieces on it, and I've read one or two others. But it should tell people something. No, you can't ignore these people. They're not going to go away. When the mainstream press is parroting their rhetoric, and word for word matching in lockstep with what they're saying, and you might even start to question your sanity. Maybe you should question your sanity, right? Because if that many people are telling you you're wrong, maybe you need to stop and think that you're wrong. But then you go look back at the evidence that you saw for yourself. No, you're not wrong. They're making it up. Look at all these women. Look at all these minorities. Do I hate black people? Do I hate women? Do I hate Jews? Do I hate gay people? No. Yet they're saying this about me, and they're not even flinching from saying it. It has to make you wonder, where else has the press and where else have your teachers led you astray and told you things that are true that are not? I don't know. Thinking for yourself and questioning authority. I guess this will never make you a popular person, but it's something more of us need to do. I don't know.
If I remember correctly, one of my very first classes, if not really the first class on national politics, the professor walked in, looked at us, and said, "We all like democracy, don't we?" Some of us nodded, others just went silent, some giggled, and no one really answered. And he asked us, "Have you taken a good look this morning on the train? Have you realized that those people in the train actually vote, and those people might cause a war?" And there was silence in the classroom, and people suddenly realized, holy shit, he's right. There's a bunch of dumb fucks everywhere, and those people are allowed to vote. Politically completely illiterate people are allowed to vote and possibly cause a war. And no one of us, not a single person, went full fascist that day. Most of us actually started questioning, started looking it up, understanding democratic theory, and no problem. Now, I think if I imagine a gender studies course today, it's basically the same thing. The professor walks in and asks, "Have you taken a look around this morning on the train?" People don't react. "Have you seen all the patriarchal oppressors on the train?" Makes you really think. And every one of them just goes full feminism, just goes full anti-patriarchy, full everything without even questioning it. And I have no idea why. Because why don't the basics of political science, why don't they apply anymore? I mean, it's still a science. You still should apply the scientific method. You should still apply any form of method. But some, sociology and gender studies, some classes just don't apply those methods and instead rely on assertions, assumptions, and pretty much just guessing. So,
Yes, start with the assumption and find the evidence to match the assumption is how too much of it works. And that's crazy. That's, you know, I'm actually not an atheist, but we don't have to go into that. But it's like a religious fundamentalist says you must believe the Bible, and everything in it is literally true. And once you start with that as axiomatically true, you now get to go find evidence that proves that the Bible is literally true. And you get to ignore any evidence that says the Bible is not literally true. You have to destroy it, or discredit it, or debase it, or ignore it, instead of saying, oh, well, maybe this part of the Bible isn't literally true. Or maybe I've got it wrong and read it wrong, or something like that. But if you start with the axiomatic premise, everything in this book must be true, then the only acceptable evidence is the evidence that says that this is true. And everything else must be discarded or destroyed. And that's, to me, a very dangerous way of looking at anything in life. And I was going to make another point, but I forgot what it was, so I guess it wasn't important.
all this talk of misogyny and stuff got you riled.
Patriarchy. I'll tell you, though, I mean, we could argue about the democracy, by the way. I'm a firm believer in it. In fact, if you study political science, I'm a firm believer in something called the democratic peace theory. I think it's a very good theory, and I think it works. But leave that aside. I can tell you why I think the patriarchy theory is an easy sell, but it's not a very politically correct observation. But I can tell you why people are willing to believe it. And it's probably why it's such a destructive theory, because it's very seductive theory. I believe, genetically, human beings, human males, from birth, I believe this is a genetic trait most males inherit, have an instinct to protect females. I believe that the vast majority of men are born with that as an instinct. And I believe that the majority of women are born with a similar instinct to protect themselves and other women. And if you look at evolution, you can see how this would work. Men evolved as the role of protectors. And so and women evolved to protect themselves and the children. And so that is an instinct we always that most humans carry in them. And so if we perceive a threat to females, our instincts kick in. There is a threat to women. There is a threat to my woman, or there is a threat to our women. Our thought processes diminish and our instincts kick in. And when people are afraid for women, they react on emotion, not logic. And so 1,000 years ago, this was functional. There's a pack of bears or wolves or an invading tribe coming in. Let's protect the women and the children. And who's going to do that? It's mostly going to be the men. Now it's the 21st century. There is no big threat to women. But in our you know, in the more primitive parts of our brain, it's like that circuitry is there in our brain, ready to be activated at any time. And so you look at a bunch of people and say, they're terrible people, they're bad to their women. Or that guy I don't know, he's bad to his woman. He's bad, he's dangerous. And so this idea of a patriarchy is easy to sell. People are willing to believe it on an instinctive level. Men love to think that they are acting to protect women. Women, as a rule, like to think of themselves as being protected by men. So if you can posit this evil force called the patriarchy, it's easy to get both men and women to fight it. Never mind that it doesn't really exist, and never really did. That's my theory. But that's why it's so seductive.
Dean, we've been talking for about an hour, and it's been really juicy. Now the question is it okay if I invite some more people, because I wanted to turn this into a slightly more open house discussion? Is that okay with you?
No, you must speak only to me. You're mine now. No, you are my problem. No, of course. You know what? You know what? In fact, I'm a little embarrassed. I've talked so much. So, absolutely, bring someone else.
No, come on. It's my YouTube channel. The people listening to me know all about me. That they might not know all that much about you. So you talking is actually a good thing, I guess.
Okay, fair enough.
So the very first person is Skeptor, a small-time YouTuber who's mostly focusing on atheism and feminism, if I understand correctly. The big issue is he has a weird accent like I have, so the viewers might need to mute the stream now because it might be an accent overload and you might have an accent gasmus, so yeah, just a fair warning.
Okay, and I'm very good at accents, so I don't know. Do I get to guess, or should I try not guess?
It's completely up to you.
Okay.
Okay, let's copy this. Send him the invite. And let's hope he joins in. Also, do we have any questions from the chat? It doesn't look like it.
Nobody loves us.
Everyone hates us.
Everybody hates us. Guess we'll go eat worms. I might be able to get somebody to join. Who is this we're inviting in now?
Skeptor.
Skeptor?
Give me a moment. I'm gonna write it in the chat. Skeptor.
Can I invite someone?
I can give you the link. Sure.
I have it.
You
I just
have
don't know
it.
who I might want to invite. I don't know. I might get some crazy men's rights person on here, and then we'd be talking about nothing but that.
Listen, the MRAs are just the worst kind of shitlord there is. They just hate women.
They invented the term shitlord to describe us. This is true. This is true. It's expanded since then, but they started it for us. So you're talking about one of the original shitlords right here.
I'm hoping he actually joins because... okay, Dean, entertain our audience. I have to figure something out here.
Sure, no problem. I'm looking on my Skype to see if there's somebody we can bring in here just to bullshit. Because it would be fun. I'd like to bring Lauren in here, or Rachel, because that would be fun. So
Rachel.
Everybody in the audience who's sitting here listening could be like, why just listen to us type to people? Because that makes very riveting and exciting radio. Listen to people type. Well, maybe we could bring Jon Gunnarsson in. That would be fun.
Jon Gunnarsson. Right now, this has to be one of the weirdest streams ever. Just two people silently talking to other people. Just
That's right. Typity, typity, type. I'm sure the audience is enjoying every second of this. It's just riveting. So you
okay.
were
So
saying,
Skeptor is in the chat. Please resend the invite. I did so, but
what
something
chat
went
would
wrong.
this be? How come I don't get to be in your evil chat full of shitlords?
Worms have rights too, you cis white hetero pig. Check your privilege.
I hate him. I am checking my privilege. Every time, at this point, you know what I think you should do? Every time somebody says, check your privilege, look down and open your zipper and say, yes, it's still there. Boom, boom, boom. Yes,
Okay.
my penis is still there. Yes, it's still there. Yep.
Okay, wait.
It's still there. Thank you.
So yes,
Well,
Skeptor, what seems to be the issue with coming online? I have never heard anyone claiming that the Hangout got blocked. And also, yeah, everyone listening, you should check out Skeptor. Like, he's doing some really good stuff.
what's his channel? Spell it.
His channel is the very same as his name, actually. If you want to, I'm gonna send you the link via Skype, where we have our secret cabal, where we secretly discuss our secrets and our lies,
Our plans to destroy women and do more raping and beating and
how to control Gamergate.
how to control Gamergate to our evil advantages. Oh, okay. He is Skeptor, Skeptorr, underneath Gamergate. Oh, he's somebody I would want to talk to. I'm even subscribed to him already. Hey, but he can't.
He looks like a really based guy. But
oh, it looks like he's made a video of my ex-compatriot John the Other. That should be interesting. I'm going to have to watch that. He's made a video about my former compatriot John the Other, so I'd like to say he probably doesn't like the. I'm going to guess Skeptor doesn't like John the Other's anti-Israel position, but that would be a whole interesting discussion of its own. I'm not anti-Israel, by the way, but anyway.
okay, so I invited another person, someone who wants to talk as well. He is Martix. He doesn't have a very large audience on YouTube. He actually is, if I remember correctly, not really active on YouTube anyway. But he wanted to be online, and well, since I'm a very meritocratic person and I want to give everyone a chance, why the fuck not?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Skeptor, yes.
Hi. Hello. Sorry for the delay. I had problems with my Firefox. It decided to not allow the Hangout, so I switched to Google to Chrome. So.
Oh, Rachel Edwards was going to. Rachel Edwards said she would join us, but she's getting ready for Honey Badger Radio tonight, so maybe we'll get her on some other time. So, Skeptor, nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you all.
I just found out about your YouTube channel like yesterday, I think, maybe 2 days ago, and yes, just yes.
Thank you. I like your channel as well. Just saw I found you via Sargon. Recommended the video you made.
I'm a big fan of Sargon's.
Who isn't?
Well, really, everybody should be.
Saga.
Everybody should be. I'm looking at your. I was subscribed to your channel already, Skeptor, and I hadn't realized it. And then I see that you have a whole video you made about crazy leftist John LaBamba.
Yeah, right.
The former compatriot of mine.
Yeah, well, he said something really, really stupid, so.
Yep. Well,
I had to say something.
He is a men's rights activist, but the only thing I'll tell you about men's rights activists is we come from all parts of the political spectrum.
Yeah, that's very reasonable.
In point of fact, I'm with A Voice for Men, and we have a Hebrew edition run by an Israeli.
That's
I'm
right.
not kidding. So if you read Hebrew, I don't know if you're Israeli or not, but if you read Hebrew, you can go to, what the hell is that? Is it he.avoiceformen.com?
Oh, you mean the Israeli MRM?
Well, yes, but okay. Voice for Men, which is a men's rights site, and our former chief editor-in-chief, he's not anymore, is John the Other. And I know he. Oh, it's all right.
No, I don't have anything personal against him.
No, you just think he said something wrong. But I would. The irony is he is very anti-Israel, which
yeah,
is,
I get that.
people are allowed to be that. But then the grand irony is if anybody goes to HEB, as in Hebrew, heb.avoiceformen.com, look what you will see there. There is our Israeli edition written in Hebrew. So we're a very diverse crowd.
Okay, so let's jump to academia. I don't know if I actually talked to you, Skeptor, before I invited you. I don't think I really did anything. Do you want to share with us what your background is in terms of academia, if you have any background?
I went to academia in Israel, and I watched the documentary called Indoctrinate You. I don't know if you watched that. It's about how academia is like you say, infested with ideologues.
Mm-hmm.
And I recommend this documentary very much. And I can't remember. I went to the university like 15 years ago, and I can't remember ever having a professor or a doctor go in and start talking, about his own opinions about any political or social issue. But I have been noticing that, like in the United States, the academia in Israel is becoming more and more like an ideologue place for a place where doctors and professors bring their own ideology and they bring it into the community, into society, and people listen to them, because they're not just crazy people off the street. They are doctors and professors, so they have some weight. And they use their. I'm sorry for speaking. I'm a bit nervous right now.
Why are you nervous?
I'm not used to doing Google Hangouts,
Yeah, trust me, we are the worst rapists. Like, if you fuck up, we will find out where you live and we will rape you.
We will.
Oh yeah.
Just for practice.
I'm sure that's not. I'm not really scared right now.
I should find where our video is and just post the. So do you speak Hebrew?
Yeah, of course. I'm a native Israeli.
Well, go check us out. heb.avoiceformen.com. It's all written in Hebrew. Some of it are translations from the English, and some are original. So.
Yeah, I don't think what I'm getting from from YouTube and from the media is that men have it much more worse in the USA or in the US or in Europe mainly in the U.S., more than Israel. There are some bad stuff here as well, but it's not as bad as I listen to many people from the United States talking about their experiences, and I'm truly shocked.
It is worse, there's no question, although even there I can tell you your own Israeli government doesn't take certain problems seriously enough. Maybe it's because of the politics of the Palestinian situation. Israeli men are 2 to 3 times more likely to kill themselves as Israeli women, for example. Obviously, women aren't subject to conscription. They can serve, but they're not forced to like boys can. Your family courts are getting bad towards men and fathers, and I predict that's going to get worse over the next 10 years unless the Knesset does something about it.
Well, there are two things I can say about that. First thing that one weird thing that happens in Israel is that men actually have some kind of defense, and it's coming from the rabbinic institution. The regular secular courts are tending to be very much pro-women in some very unreasonable ways. But I'm an atheist, you know. I'm not, you know, for the rabbinic institution, but still, it's some kind of a balancing force. It has some kind of a weight. So weirdly enough, this is where men get more support than the government. And the second thing that I wanted to say is that I did read about a recommendation from a committee that was made that, for example, when you need to pay child support, then you would factor in the number of days that each parent is taking care of the child and the differences between incomes. So we got weird stories here where the man's income is like 8,000 shekels, the woman's income is like 12,000 shekels, and he needs to pay 7,000 shekels child support, which is insane. I have a friend of a friend who went to jail because he couldn't pay child support, and he doesn't have the money to pay child support.
And you know, that's the thing that's happening in a lot of countries. A lot of countries, and the U.S. is one of them too, debtor's prison is not legal except for child support, which is crazy because, of course, it creates the same problem that debtor's prison always does. If you put someone in jail because they can't pay, now they really can't pay because they're in jail.
Exactly.
And that is turning something we call child support into what I would have to call slavery, because you can't get, unless you're going to flee the country, and even then they might find you. And of course, she can unilaterally choose the divorce, and you just have to pay. And it doesn't matter whether you can pay or not. And that is a real issue. And to me, it's a human rights issue.
It's a vicious cycle. It becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah, yeah. Not that we're here all to talk about men's issues, but still, these issues are real. And I have a theory about this, which is that whether you're religious or not, any religious group. Here's my theory. Okay, you're an atheist. That's fine. A lot of people are. Let's just say you take an entirely atheistic view of religion, right? There truly is no God or gods. I don't happen to believe that, but that doesn't enter in it. Let's take that as our starting assumption. There is no higher power like that. What then is religion? Why do people always have it? You could take Richard Dawkins' view, which I happen to think is wrong, which is that it's just a bad set of ideas. I don't think that's what religion is as a phenomenon. I think it's something that human beings develop an actual need for, like spirituality is something people have a need for, whatever you want to call it. This feeling, what we call spirituality, people need it. And it becomes a force for binding people together as a community. And if you have a religion that's functional, let's put it to you this way, if a religion were truly dysfunctional, it would not survive past a generation or two, would it? because it would be counter-survival. So any religion like Judaism or the other Abrahamic faiths, Christianity or Islam, that have lasted for thousands of years, they must be functional in some way. If they weren't functional, they would fall apart.
Well, that depends on what they're functioning
Buddhism.
for. Hi, by
The
the
point
way.
is that if they restricted people's ability to survive and to stay coherent as a community, the religion, it's Darwinian, right? It would be survival of the fittest. If it impaired people's ability to reproduce and survive and propagate, then that religion would eventually die out. So any religion is going to have to develop functional rules for society, by definition. Now you can say that
a religion can't just a religion can't just kill one off that believes in it, and of course it's going to die out, but that doesn't mean that religion in any way optimizes survival of its adherents.
I think that the most prevalent religions probably have optimized the survival of their adherents. I do think that I can't prove it, but I would think more studies should be done in this area.
Then how do you explain things like holy wars? Or, I mean, these things are good for preserving, for the fitness of your religion, for basically for its, if you take a religion on a sort of a mimetic basis as propagating the ideas, then religious wars are good. But if you take it as biological survival, then religious wars are very bad behavior.
Just choosing the term as mimetics, you're already accepting Dawkins' proposition. A counter proposition is that religious wars aren't really caused by the religions themselves. They need some other basis, and that's usually going to be a fight over resources. And thus, that would view most religious wars as actually not caused by the religion, but rather the religion being an excuse to cause a fight for resources, for land, for water, for food, etc. Religion becomes the pretext. If you accept my theory, religion is the pretext for such wars. So you look at the Holy Wars, the Crusades, they were not truly wars for religion. There was an ulterior motive for those leading the religious wars, and that was over resources. Land, gold, whatever it was. And so the winner of the religious war gets to keep all the goodies, gets to keep those resources, and that's the real reason for the religious war.
I think you're misstating Dawkins' position here. Before you said there is just religion is just a set of bad ideas, but that's really not his position at all. It's an idea. It's a set of very adaptive ideas that are good at propagating themselves.
Right.
And whether they are also good for the people propagating them is largely irrelevant on this view. They may be good for these people, they may be bad. That's
right. But the Dawkins position would be that the meme is what survives, and it doesn't matter if it wipes out whole population groups, right? Mm-hmm. So as long as the meme survives, the meme is doing well.
Yep.
So it's almost like a selfish gene hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
It's the selfish meme. It manages to propagate itself. Mine would say, no, that's got it backwards. The meme is surviving because it makes people more effective at fighting for resources, at binding themselves together as a community, at fighting off shared enemies, and defeating people and taking other people's resources from them. So it is a pro-survival trait for the culture itself, that it makes the culture stronger,
but
that binds the culture together and also makes them more capable of waging war effectively.
But that is not necessarily opposed to the Dawkins idea, if you want to call it like that. I mean, that's certainly also a way of making the meme more fit, as making the people who hold that meme, better able to obtain resources and spread their culture through war and through trade and whatever. That would also be a method of mimetic reproduction, and certainly both can can exist side by side. I'm not disputing that.
I think
Mo. As long as the meme survives, everything is good. Guys, I love hearing this kind of talk online. Like, this is the kind of level of debate we need to have. But can I redirect you a little bit more towards the whole social justice warrior infestation of academia thing? Sorry
Well,
to be a buzzkill, but
no,
I love
that's
to stay on
okay.
topic.
That's okay. I'll tell you what, I think social justice is a concept that does have some roots in cultural Marxism. I don't think that's all there is to it. It's definitely strongly rooted in feminism, and it is, by any stretch that I can tell, a religion. It has dogmas, it has doctrines. Feminism is not an ideology. It's a religion. It is akin to National Socialism. It is akin to fundamentalist Christianity. It is akin to communism, Marxism. It is akin. It matches. Without a deity, it matches all the criteria of a religion.
I mean, it
And-
quite efficiently creates a very own vocabulary, and with that vocabulary, it pretty much justifies itself. So it is very, very immune to criticism, because if you want to combat it, you need to use the vocabulary that movement, this ideology has created. And if you use that vocabulary, you are going to lose, because that vocabulary is set up, so you will lose.
Yeah, it's also very akin to religion in that.
Yes, of course, of course.
Well,
So-
I actually would say that I don't even think it's akin to a religion. I do believe it's a religion. Feminism in particular, especially. I mean, I have had people tell me, I've had feminists tell me, flat out, they're horrified by this, that, or the other thing that they see ideological feminism doing. And they feel horrible about it, and they want to know what to do. And I said, well, one thing you could do is stop calling yourself a feminist, call yourself a humanist or an egalitarian, and stop supporting feminism by identifying with it. And I've had women say, I would never do that. It's part of who I am. Isn't that what a Muslim or a Catholic or a Jew says? I actually am a Catholic. I'll put myself out there. But I mean, isn't that the same mentality? It's like it becomes part of their identity. And they don't want to separate from it, and they can't separate from it. They'd rather die than separate from it. I remember
the ideology is an axiom, not something which you criticize.
Yeah, basically start from the assumption of feminism or whatever religion you want to choose, or whether it's Marxism or whatever, and then you find reasons for believing that and not the other way around.
Yeah, and when reality is telling you otherwise, then instead of changing the way you think or integrating that new information into your belief system, you just distort it.
Yeah, and you invent sort of manipulative language, redefine terms like what the social justice community does, redefining things like racism and sexism, not as racial discrimination or discrimination based on sex, but discrimination that is institutional power. Blacks can't be sexist, can't be racist against whites, and so on, so that you can always deflect that from your own in-group, these accusations.
Oh, it's John. I didn't even notice you had joined us, John. Nice.
Hi.
Nice to see you. John Gunnarsson.
Sorry for not introducing myself.
That's okay. I'm going to take a typical example, an example of what you're talking about. And I know some people will be listening to this and saying we're being too extreme, but no, I don't think so. Humans haven't changed that much. If you look at the Third Reich, I've read some of Joseph Goebbels' diaries and read a lot about him and his wife. And he said he considered National Socialism the religion of the German people. National Socialism was the religion in his eyes. and it was in his family's eyes. And
Yeah,
his
and
wife, as people may recall, she was a very committed National Socialist, and she said right in the final days of the Third Reich, she could not imagine life without National Socialism. And she personally killed all of her children so that they would not be captured by the Allies. She killed her children, fed them morphine, and then I think gave them suicide or something. But they had like 5 children, and she killed them in their sleep because she did not want them to live in an unimaginable world without National Socialism. This is how powerful the grip of this ideology was on her and on him, because of course then after she killed their children, she went to her husband and they killed each other, or they killed themselves together. This is not an example of why social justice warriors are Nazis. This is an example of how deep an ideology can bury itself in a person, so deep they would rather die than give it up.
What do you think is the main difference between people who are like social justice warriors and other people who are not?
Someone else give an opinion. I'm talking too much.
Uh,
Hello.
I think we have someone. Nick, is that you? Are you alive?
Yep, that's me. Hi.
I'm gonna make you a little bit louder so we can hear you. Say something again.
Yeah, Nick, you're very low. You're very low, Nick.
Is that better?
Somewhat,
A
but
little
you're
bit.
really low.
Maybe I can adjust it. Let me check some settings.
We believe in you, Nick. We love you. You can do this, man. And if not, the same rule applies to you. If you fail, we will rape you. So,
Okay.
We'll find you and rape you. So I don't know. Well, I'll ask John's opinion then, or Skeptor's. I know I'm talking like I'm in
well,
trouble.
I know
hard.
maybe my view is a bit simplistic, but I view it as people who like to educate other people and people who don't like to be educated. I mean, when I drive and I do something, while I'm driving that, pisses somebody off, and he needs to, stop at the next light and tell me something. So I always roll up the window, and I'm doing like a mime, like I cannot hear you because the window is closed, and the reason is I don't want people to try to educate me, educate anyone else. I don't want to tell people what they should think or what they should not think. I don't care what people do. I think people should do whatever they feel like doing, and some people just can't handle that. People just can't bear the thought that if they want to be nice, then everyone else needs to be nice. If they think something is right to do, then everyone should feel the same. And for me, social justice warriors means everybody must think the way I do.
And the really scary thing is that they say that they're all about tolerance and so on, but that's not really it.
No.
They really are the true authoritarians. They want everyone to be free to say and to express their opinions that they agree with. So
Yeah,
as long as you have exactly the right set of opinions, you talk, you have freedom of speech and so on. But if you don't, then you're just a privileged shitload, and you need to be shut up.
Yeah, it's kind of I lost the word in English. Excuse me for a second.
you can do this, man.
It's a contradiction that people say we are extremely tolerant and we have zero tolerance for people who are not as tolerant as we are.
Yes, basically zero tolerance for intolerance.
Yeah, exactly.
I define intolerance as anything that disagrees with me.
This reminds me of one of my favorite episodes of South Park. I don't know if you guys ever saw it, but it was called the Museum of Tolerance.
Oh yes, that was so good.
go to the Museum of Tolerance, and it basically turns into a concentration camp by the end.
Oh yeah,
Will
yeah.
be tolerance,
I remember that.
or you will die.
No, but the thing is, it actually is like that when you take a look around you. It's I know it's a joke, okay? They tried to satirize it, but the thing is, we currently live in a society that is so bound to this whole political correctness narrative that whatever you say, as long as it does not fit this narrative, it warrants censorship. And that's like a huge contradiction. On the one hand, those people who want to censor you are all for freedom of speech. But as soon as you say something, no matter how well sourced and how just sane the claim is, as long as it does not subscribe to their political correctness, they will censor you. And I think this hypocrisy is a very big issue, because they often try to rationalize it with the claims such as, well, hate speech is not free speech. But as soon as you create this apparatus, this framework, when you say, well, we can ban hate speech, who defines hate speech? Who says what exactly hate speech is? Is it just against a minority, against women, against a neighboring state, against a TV show? Whoever controls the narrative, as long or rather as soon as this framework is set up, whoever controls the narrative controls the free speech.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hate
And
speech
here in
is a
Europe,
very weird
most
term.
countries. Sorry.
Especially in Sweden and in Netherlands, politicians go get persecuted for just stating facts, statistics, and they call it hate speech.
It's hate facts.
Hate facts, yeah.
Number rape.
Yeah, reality, if it has a factual reality, has some hate in it, I guess, inherent hate in it.
I mean, in European countries, there's some laws that prohibit certain forms of oppression. You can go to jail for certain things.
Sorry,
And,
mate, your
some
connection
of the-
is dropping out occasionally. Would you mind stopping downloading all that gay furry porn? It would really, really help.
Oh, sorry, stopping for now, but I'm actually not downloading anything, so
Okay.
not sure what's going on there.
No, it is a bit laggy, isn't it? Question
Okay.
directed towards the other participants.
Yeah, it's breaking off a bit.
Sounds fine to me.
He started bad at first. No, he sounds good now.
Okay, so maybe it's better now.
So and this is what is bothering me. Well, several things bother me. First off, if these people control academia, they can't be ignored, because their ideology will go in all directions from there, and including into government. But see, what I used to think, and now I'm becoming jaded and not so sure, I used to think the internet would fix this, right? Because the internet will fix and make sure there's a free flow of information. But this is where I get in trouble with some of my libertarian friends. And by the way, John is one of my libertarian friends. I actually worry about the power of large corporations to control the narrative, and by doing so, even control the internet itself. Like Gamergate, for example, if you manage to shut down Gamergate on Twitter, Gamergate is over. If Twitter weren't there, there would be no Gamergate, because all the other major sites essentially banned discussion of it. They're in the hands of a small set of corporate elite, and so therefore the target for social justice warriors is obviously not just the powers of government, it's the power of large corporate entities. And let's face it, if they took over Google, they could just make this entire conversation disappear. And that frightens me.
Yeah, but if they took over Google to some other platform, it's not like Google controls the entire internet, even though of course they do control a lot.
How do you find it then? That's the problem. How do people start finding each other? Without Twitter, and YouTube, Gamergate would be dead. And a few of us would find our way somewhere else. But it would basically be over, because this is a global movement. How do people find each other? I don't know what the solution is, but I mean, when I saw Reddit and all the other major sites, well, except for The Escapist, all the other major sites, just even 4chan for a while there, block all discussion of this issue, I became genuinely frightened. And I thought, what would have happened? Especially if YouTube and Twitter had just decided, you know, we don't want to see this. That would have been the end of it, and no one would know, even. I don't know, it's just a philosophical question. But I think the social justice warriors are going after the big corporations and not just government.
I don't think they can manage to do that. If you think about it, where there's a will, there's a way, and gamers have a very strong will to talk about this. And just as the corporations try to avoid people from downloading music or downloading movies, and they sued people for a lot of money, people found a way, you know, and I don't think you can stop it.
And the thing is that corporations care about making money, not so much necessarily about being popular. And if appealing to gamers, appealing to gamers is a lot more profitable than appealing to feminists, to be honest. There's not actually all that many feminists out there. They're just really loud, and the mainstream media is very in favor of them. But in terms of actual numbers, appealing to feminists is not necessarily obviously a good strategy for corporations. There will be some corporations that pander to them, but also others who will find it profitable to be against feminism, at least not openly supporting feminism, as we've seen in Gamergate, where various large corporations have pulled their ads from some of these websites like Kotaku and so on.
Well, you're right. So I guess ultimately you can trust the marketplace of ideas, but
I mean,
I really believe that these people are trying to, well, they clearly are getting into the halls of power in large corporate entities. Again, then I guess you just have to count on smaller competitors making their way through and fighting it. I don't know. I guess I'm just generalizing.
I mean, the market and so on is not perfect, but it's better than the alternative. Like, what else are we supposed to turn to?
Well, you know, regulated markets would be the answer, but
regulated by whom?
Yeah, well, that would be the state, wouldn't it? So it becomes who watches the watchman? An eternal question.
Stop market ripping my economy.
Yeah. I don't know.
The good thing about, you know, the free market here, it's really protecting gamers on that one. You know, if there's social justice warriors and lobbyists will try to regulate it in some way, they wouldn't be able to do that in a free market.
They wouldn't, of course not.
But these people will go after more than things. I mean, it's not just video games. I know a little bit about John and his work. He is what they like to call a climate change denialist, right, John?
Not really.
I mean, don't call you that?
It's sort of complicated, and I'm not part of either the denialist or the alarmist tribe.
Well, here neither am I. But here's something I've noticed even watching that debate. There's one side who says, I have questions here, and I want to talk about these questions that I have because they're tough. And there's the other side that wants to shout you down and shut you up and call you names. I am like you. I think that a lot of what they've said about global warming is clearly exaggerated. I think it should be okay to say this, but I've seen efforts to actually make it illegal or at least people talking like they want to make it illegal to even question. And again, the pattern seems very eerily similar here. You have one set of people who think this is the truth and this is the only truth that is allowed to be discussed, and you have another set of people who just have questioning minds. It makes me think, is it something genetic in with questioning minds and some of us aren't?
Well, I think it comes down to tribalism. Basically, there's this global warming tribe, and then there's this anti-global warming tribe, and this one tribe is currently in control. They're in power, so they're shouting down anyone who opposes them, and to an extent, global warming has sort of become a thing that people identify with. That's something that's part of their identity. They, think, I follow the science on global warming and all these evil corporations polluting the environment, and these stupid evil conservatives trying to let them get away with it. We have to stop those. And on the other side, the people who talk about these crazy environmentalists and who just hate technological progress and so on. So you get these sort of charged up narratives, and neither side is really willing to engage with the evidence in a dispassionate way, and it creates this really toxic discussion.
And then there's this other group of people, like I'm guessing the people in this conversation, who just say, what is the evidence, and let's follow the evidence wherever it leads us. And I don't know, are we a strange mutant minority or what? Because I don't know, I just think it points to something bigger in human nature. I know I'm dominating the conversation, but I don't know. I guess some people are closed-minded and some people are open-minded, and that's all there is to it. Maybe it's just that simple.
I don't think that you can really nail it on general open-mindedness or closed-mindedness. I think you have to always look at the cultural context. And for instance, what I noticed, I know this is just an empirical statement, but I think it has some weight to it. When I was in Eastern Europe, people actually are much more critical and much more open-minded of their media than people in Western Europe, because, as we all know, people in Eastern Europe suffered through some really, really bad propaganda, while the Western people, they don't remember what it feels like to have propaganda shoved down their throats, or at least most don't remember. So, while those cultures are very close to each other, one culture is very critical, very skeptical of their news, of their just general media outlets, including newspapers and television news, while the Western culture just, by, again, experience, just eats up whatever the TV or the newspapers publish. So I don't think that's a natural thing. I think this might be more of a cultural thing.
Well, yeah. And that's an interesting thought. And one of the other things I've noticed about people from countries that have experienced, a horrid, a state that's extremely oppressive and doesn't allow free thought, sometimes they can even be excessively paranoid and convinced they're being lied to when they're not, right? I've seen that sometimes, For example, my father-in-law, wonderful man, loved him very much, emigrated to the United States from Poland so he grew up, actually when he was born, Poland was under Nazi occupation, and then growing up, they were liberated from the Nazis by Stalin. So not a happy story for the Poles, right? He eventually comes over here in the late 1960s. And all the way until he died, which was about 10 years ago, he and his brother, who also live here in the United States, they both managed to get here from Poland, were convinced on every phone call they made that the government was listening and were being very careful about everything they said on the telephone.
They were right. Only they.
And as Americans, we would chuckle at them. Huh? Well, as an American, at first I wanted to chuckle at him and say, Gene, Yoganish was his name, but we called him Gene. So, Gene, you're not that interesting. They don't care. But then I got to stop myself and think, but wait a minute, where did he come out of, right? I don't know. Go ahead. You were saying he was right. Go ahead.
I'm saying he was right, but only off by a few years. If you thought that today, then you know.
So the government very much wants to listen to our conversations, but just back then the technology wasn't quite there. And I mean, even now they cannot listen in, but there's just so many conversations that listen to them can only pick very few people to listen to. But of course, it's also going to change when there's efficient algorithms for parsing speech and looking for certain keywords and so on. That's soon going to make it feasible to listen to everything interesting.
And so maybe in the long run, the only way to be free is to try to hide nothing and just live with it if you're unpopular.
So I wish to ask you, where do you think Gamergate is going from here?
Oh, can I answer this one? Because this was one of the core things I actually went over when studying. And you find a certain pattern in social movements, in every form of social movement. And currently, Gamergate is just following this pattern really, really hard. In the beginning, you have this true grassroots movement. Then you have the declaration of leaders. Then you have the infighting. And currently, we are at the infighting. It really depends how people handle the current situation. If they just decide to drop this whole infighting bullshit that is just, well, bullshit, we might be able to stick around for quite a while, actually. My estimate is we might even get Gorka down, we might even do some real good. But the thing is, every one of us has limited resources. That means limited time, limited money, limited attention span. And that's a very big issue with grassroots movements, because if, just imagine what would happen if just 10%, maybe 5% of the really vocal people of Gamergate just drop out and just say, well, I had enough, I need a week rest. That more often than not sends a chain reaction through the entire movement, which results in more and more people dropping out, with morality taking a big hit, which in the end might result in a, well, death by whimper, because most people think that a movement often ends with a big bang, with a last storm against someone or somebody, but that really never happens. What happens if a movement like this dies, it just dies with a whimper. A few guys stick around and make their Gamergate videos, but nobody cares. So I guess to get back at my point, it depends how people treat the current infighting situation. If we handle it properly, we have a chance of preserving. If we don't handle it properly, well, that's it with Gamergate.
Yeah, and my prediction, and I'm going to drop out here in a few minutes, fellows, but my prediction is it will resolve itself. I really do, because ultimately, I think most of the people who are leaders, for want of a better word, there is no leader of Gamergate, but the leading lights, they know that the big picture is not about their petty squabbles. So that's my prediction there. But I did think you made an interesting point there. Most successful revolutions, people get stupid, right? They look at South Africa and apartheid, and they think Nelson Mandela walked out of jail and apartheid was over and everything was better in South Africa, right? No, that's not what happened. Or you're stupid. I'll talk about Germany again. Stupid Americans especially, but other people too think, why, yes, there was East and West Germany, and then there was the Berlin Wall, and the Berlin Wall fell, and everything was better in Germany.
Everything, this very instant, wall fell. Everything turned golden.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the wall was really just a symbol. I mean, most people don't realize this, but the wall wasn't really around East Germany. It was just around part of Berlin. It was just a really small thing in the grand scheme of things, just a symbol, basically.
That's right, and it took years and a lot of work for Germany to become truly a unified nation, and actually still not everything is done, right?
Yeah,
There's even still some
the
tensions
East,
there.
there's still a lot, much higher unemployment there. There's much less much less firms there. There's not a lot of work there. People are still poorer there. Germany is still partly divided, so to speak.
The western part of Germany is still paying the Solidaritätsbeitrag, or the Soli in short, which is a form of tax, if I remember correctly, that goes directly in the development fund towards the east of Germany. So I think that gives you a good picture.
Hey guys, it's been a real honor, and I've really enjoyed talking to you guys. I've got to go, but I hope you guys keep this up, and I'm going to listen to it when it's over.
Okay, Dean, it's been great having you. If you ever want to talk about social justice warriors again, hit me up. We can always set a stream up.
Anytime. I hope Nick gets his mic fixed.
I just got it fixed, so I hope I can say goodbye.
Okay, this sounds decent. Nice. Okay, everyone, this has been Dean Esme. Is my, I don't know, I'll just call you Dean. Dean with a beard. Dean with a beard. He's managing editor for A Voice of Men. Dean, great having you.
I feel bad that I didn't get to talk to him.